Yves Engler, a self-described ecosocialist and anti-imperialist who is running for the leadership of the federal NDP, has submitted his application for vetting by the party. If he makes it through the approval process, Engler will become the sixth candidate in the race to succeed Jagmeet Singh following the party's historic defeat in April's federal election. His bid for approval by the party's leadership vote committee follows a tour with stops in New Brunswick's three major cities. He spoke to the NB Media Co-op on Friday afternoon ahead of a speaking event in Moncton. Stay tuned. So, Yves, currently the NDP has 5 officially approved candidates for the leadership. These are the candidates that have been vetted by the party's leadership vote committee. You're not on there. You said that you're holding back on submitting for vetting by the committee, criticizing it for being undemocratic, causing progressives to self-censor, and so on. Can you talk about the vetting process and why it's a problem in your view?
Yeah, well, basically there's 3 people who have the ability to decide if a candidate or campaign is legitimate. And it's very vague or very broad, maybe I should say, terms in which they can make that decision. We are actually going to be putting in for vetting on Monday. I'm going to be going to Ottawa to do that, to physically deliver it to the NDP office. But yeah, there's a long history of the vetting blocking candidates that say essentially that Palestinians are human beings. There's some pretty egregious examples. Paul Manley, probably the worst example, his father ran for the NDP and was an MP for the NDP for a couple terms out in Nanaimo, and he criticized the NDP for not challenging Israel kidnapping his father on the boat to Gaza back in I think 2013, 2014, and they blocked him from running for the party. And then the next election, he won the Nanaimo MP position for the Green Party, which was obviously very, very embarrassing for the NDP. So there's a long history, many examples of blocking candidacies. It's got to the point where the vetting is just a real centralization of power. And in the document, nomination packages says that it's about the values of the party. But ultimately, it should be the members that decide the values of the party, and who the leader is of the party is in part a big part of what the values of the party are. Obviously, also what is passed at convention and different policy positions. So it is an undemocratic process. We are challenging that. We've not desired to stay outside of the formal vetting because you have access to the large list of contacts. You have access to the tax credits that come from Elections Canada. When you fundraise, you have access to the different forums. We do want all that. We want to be, part of the official, but also we want to make it, get as much momentum and make it as difficult for the party to exclude us if they choose to go that undemocratic path.
And I've got to ask, because you definitely had some resistance from the party establishment. I think last month there was a story which had the NDP's chief electoral officer on the record saying you have no current standing in the leadership race, and even suggesting that you had been misleading the press on that score and that you were accepting campaign contributions before getting official approval from the leadership committee in violation of campaign rules. So just any comment on that briefly?
Well, it's certainly true that we hadn't put in for vetting. That's correct. I've been upfront. By that point, I'd talked to at least a dozen different interviews in public forums and explained exactly what our strategy was, which was to get the nomination signatures, far surpass what was required, the 500 nomination signatures, and also to fundraise, because you have to pay $100,000 to be part of the race. We've followed Elections Canada rules for a prospective candidate. We've been in touch with Elections Canada going back to late August, asking all these questions of what the rules are. We are completely within the law that's set down by Elections Canada. We are not following the NDP rules because we are not formally part of the NDP race. So the NDP was very much misleading in that description to the media, it wasn't the first example, right? The NDP, I went to the Ontario NDP convention in Niagara in late September, and they wouldn't let me into the convention, and that was the big sign. We'd already had other signs, but that was a big sign that they were very much angling to exclude us from formally participating in this race, and so that influenced our position on when we were going to submit for vetting, knowing that the odds are they're probably going to block us, and we need to build a bunch more momentum. We need to get our platform out. We need to do more touring. We need to do a bunch of things to shape the whole discussion of the race, because the aim here is not just to be leader of the party. The aim is to have impact on the political direction of all the leadership candidates, and we've done that. And we've just actually, Heather McPherson just basically took our language around declaring a national emergency on housing, which we're very happy about, because the point here is not necessarily just to be leader of the party, but to impact the whole discussion of Canadian politics.
Yeah, so you're currently on campaigning on a tour of Eastern Canada. Previously in September, I believe you were on a tour with stops in BC and Manitoba and Ontario. What have you been hearing from your supporters at various stops around the country?
Well, I've been hearing that there is a desire for a bold challenge to capitalism, challenge to imperialism, to promote economic democracy, to call for a degrowth, decolonization. I'm hearing that people are very receptive to not just trying to have sound bites, not just trying to say what is thought to be acceptable within the parameters of discussion. Obviously, the people that are coming out to the events tend to share my opinions on these things, but I've had lots of support. We've had probably done about 25 public events across the country over the past 2 months or so, and lots of people have come out. People that are coming out understand the dynamics with the NDP and vetting people out, and very milquetoast NDP. They understand that this is a insurgent campaign. This is a long shot campaign. I think that the live stream Holocaust in Gaza, and 2 years in, the fact that Canada continues to enable it in all kinds of different ways, I think there's a lot of people who have watched, Palestinians 50, 100 killed every day, children being killed day after day, and are just taken aback by the whole political establishment in this country, from the media sphere to the business sphere to the vast majority of politicians, enabling this, and they're just sort of like, wow, we live in a messed up system. Obviously, alongside that, you have questions of wealth inequality with a billionaire class, and you have the whole eco side ramping up. So people, I think, are looking for something that's going to disrupt the status quo, and that's what I've been doing, not as a politician, but as an activist and writer for the past 20 plus years. And so I think people understand that this is not some he just wants to have power. This is really a belief in these ideas and a willingness to challenge power. And so I've heard a lot of surprising amount of support, and that also with the question of fundraising. That was a fascinating one. We were announcing our fundraising successes because we were taken aback by how quickly we raised $85,000 in 3 weeks, and we were boasting about it. And then the party and some of the media and others have turned it against us as a sign of they're up to some sort of financial shenanigans, when it was us that were boasting about our huge fundraising success, because we were surprised, quite frankly, that a anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist campaign was generating so much financial. Usually, that's a huge obstacle to radical left politics.
War with Russia, Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau, you sent more than $2 billion in weapons to fight the NATO proxy war. Mr. Trudeau, end the NATO proxy war.
You're a self-described agitator, and you're known for your books, but also in part for disrupting speeches and press conferences by high-ranking cabinet ministers, at least one prime minister.
More than one.
You're not shying away from explicitly left-wing stance on foreign and domestic policy, including corporate power, militarism, climate change. Why do you think it's important for the NDP to tack left?
Well, the world needs it. The country needs it. Look at simple thing like we have more than 60,000 people every night sleeping on the streets in abject misery. And we have Trudeau saying a few years ago, housing is a right, and then doing nothing about it and the problem getting worse. How is it possible in 2025 that there's a Thompson family that holds nearly $100 billion, and then 60,000 people, but 250,000 at some point in the year, homeless. I mean, how is that possible? How is it possible that we're expanding the tar sands when we know what we know about climate science, and we have hundreds of thousands being driven from their homes due to forest fires every summer now? Or for that matter, looking at what's happening in Gaza, and so the reality of the situation, the economic concentration, the wealth divide, the ecocide requires big transformation. Capitalism is antithetical to sustainability. The profit motive, constant expansion, it leads to massive ecological damage, and we have to have some political force in this country that's willing to say that, or at minimum, not even talk about capitalism, minimum say shut down the tar sands. And the reality is none of the other candidates in this NDP leadership race will say something as simple and obvious as we need to shut down the tar sands. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Okay, let's go. Maybe is it 10 years? But it has to happen, and it has to happen pretty quick. So I think if you look at the state of the world, there's this need. Now, additionally, this conservative milquetoast NDP, 7 seats. I mean, so you follow the most conservative kind of line as a party, and by their own standards, this was a disaster in terms of the parliamentary wing of the party. So I think the party needs to turn more towards the grassroots. It has to rebuild a whole different conception of how to do politics. To a certain extent, go back to the roots. The CCF in the Regina Manifesto, they talk about eradicating capitalism. This kind of discussion should be part of the NDP, certainly part of the NDP leadership race.
Your comment on the victory of Zoran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race?
Obviously, it's a good thing. Obviously, he's far better than Como. It's a sign that socialism is not, taboo. I have to say that there are elements of what Mamdani's done already in terms of backing away from some of his positions on the apartheid genocidal state. I'm a little concerned about going in that direction. I think that the fact that Mamdani was arrested multiple times and for political reasons, when it comes to the NDP vetting, that's one of the questions they asked. I myself have been arrested a few times. I think that's a sign of a good politician. Apparently, some people are saying that there's no vetting process in the Democratic mayoral primaries. So if they followed the NDP rules, Mamdani probably wouldn't have even been allowed to run. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. But obviously, it's a sign. It's also a sign in terms of the big picture with Donald Trump. So you have your option of going this sort of right-wing fascistic direction, or an option of going a socialistic, egalitarian, multicultural kind of direction.
And just on the topic of getting arrested, earlier this year, I think, you spent, I believe, a weekend in jail over basically spurious harassment allegations from a Zionist influencer of some kind. What's the status on that? Were there any charges? Has that all been dropped? Yeah,
I spent 5 days in jail fighting a condition for my release. And the condition for my release was that I couldn't mention the name of the Dahlia Kurtz, who accused me of harassment, because I responded to her posts on X, which were very anti-Palestinian, pro-genocide posts. And she was able to get the police to charge me for harassment. And they have subsequently, after spending 5 days in jail, they have subsequently dropped the charges vis-a-vis Dahlia Kurtz. But after the police called me to tell me they were charging me for harassing Dahlia Kurtz, I wrote about it, and I called on people to email the police to drop these ridiculous charges. In response, the Montreal police brought in 4 more charges, essentially accusing me of harassing the Montreal police.
Yes.
Harassing the SPVM. And so while they dropped the charges with Dahlia Kurtz in the summer, they've maintained the 4 charges of me allegedly harassing the Montreal police, and now I have a court case on November 28th, and actually my lawyer just called me a couple of days ago saying he had received expert testimony of my apparent law violation. So they seem like they're going to go forward with it. I thought they were going to probably drop it and just, because it's so ridiculous. But they seem they're going to go forward. And so I have a court case on November 28th for harassing the police by writing about the police bringing odious charges against me, which they have subsequently dropped.
I wanted to talk about the federal budget. You've criticized Mark Carney and the Liberals on issues including the pledge to massively increase military spending in response to pressure from Donald Trump. The federal budget has finally been released, and there are a lot of budget cuts, but not for rearming the Canadian forces. So your thoughts on the budget?
Well, there's a huge boost to military spending in the budget, which is on top of a boost that was announced in June, which is on top of doubling of the budget during Trudeau's 10 years in office from $20 billion to $40 billion and from 1.1% of GDP to 1.4%. It's remarkable. The militarist turn of Mark Carney is unprecedented, at least since the Korean War of the early 1950s, and probably goes back to World War II. And they made this huge increase in military spending as they cut 40,000 jobs in the federal service, as they cut the commitment to 2 billion trees and a whole series of other climate related initiatives. And they're basically telling us that the bigger threat to Canadians is in China and Russia and Iran than the forest fires that drove a couple 100,000 people from their homes in the summer, and almost certainly will do that again next summer, and who knows what other climate-induced disaster will come over the next coming months. So Carney's budget is a clear war budget. It should be opposed very aggressively. Beyond the fact that there's McCartney announced $1 billion for homelessness. One of the surface combatant naval vessels they're building costs about $7.5 billion each. Life cycle about 3 times that, around $20 billion. So they're giving about an eighth to homelessness as they are for one of the 15 surface combatants. The priorities, the immorality of putting more money into warfare. And let's be clear, the Canadian military is structured to assist the U.S. empire in global power projection. The Canadian military is not designed to defend Canada from the only country that could invade this country, which of course is the one with the president talking about annexing Canada. Instead, what we're doing exactly what Donald Trump wants, which is to increase military spending. And so Carney is trying to placate Trump by putting more money into a military machine that is, its history is of assisting U.S. in bombing Libya, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, the first Iraq War, and on and on and on.
And on that note, you're known for a critical anti-imperialist stance towards Canadian foreign policy, particularly with regard to Israel and the Gaza genocide. How does your stance on Palestine and Canadian foreign policy set you apart from other NDP candidates in your view?
Weirdly, our policy sets us apart by this simple notion of we're calling for Canada to uphold our laws vis-a-vis Israel. Simple as that. If Canada upheld its current law towards Israel, that would be a huge step away from complicity in genocide and apartheid. The Export-Import Act says it's illegal to sell weapons to countries involved in major human rights violations. Canada sells bullets as of April, delivering bullets to Israel. The Canada Revenue Agency rules say that registered charities can't support foreign countries' militaries, racist organizations, West Bank settlements, and yet we have dozens of Canadian registered charities, subsidized by all Canadians, that are supporting the Israeli military, West Bank colonies, racist organizations in Israel. And the Canada Revenue Agency does not revoke their charitable status. The Foreign Enlistment Act says that it's illegal to induce Canadians to join another country's military. There's a school in Toronto where a quarter of the graduates, a quarter of the 17-year-old boys are joining the Israeli military. The War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act is those who've engaged in major human rights violations should be investigated and prosecuted. The Maple reported on at least 49 Canadians, and certainly numbers far higher than that, who fought in Gaza over the past 2 years. Plus dozens or hundreds of Israelis who've come to Canada who fought in Gaza. There has been not a single investigation under Canada's War Crimes Act. Everybody who's fought in Gaza should be investigated. Many of them, probably most of them, should be prosecuted. So just upholding Canadian law. So we have other issues. We call for the end to the Canada's anti-Palestinian terrorism list. We talk about Operation Proteus, the aid to the Palestinians, aid in quotations, which is about building a Palestinian security force to oversee the occupation of the West Bank. But basically, if Canada just stopped treating Israel as a special, unique country, that would go a long way in terms of ending this country's complicity in the live stream Holocaust in Gaza.
Anything to add briefly before we wrap up?
No.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. I've been speaking to Yves Engler, Montreal-based author, activist, and nominee for the leadership of the NDP. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for doing this.